Look, it's no secret that I'm a bit of a Mac fanboy, so trust me when I say that for the last 17 years I have read tens of thousands of comments telling me that Macs are objectively a terrible value. And for a long time, I didn't have a great retort because while it has been my subjective opinion that macOS and Apple hardware is vastly better than the competition, objectively, those critics were correct. Because from the entry level all the way up to mid-tier workstations, Apple now has the best computers, objectively, dollar per dollar. And it's not close. A Mac is the best deal in computing. What? I never thought I'd be able to say that, but this isn't some masterful gambit by Apple. It's largely, but not entirely, dumb luck. So let's talk about how we got here, where Apple somehow became a great deal, how Apple uniquely weathers this component storm that's driving all this, and also where things go from here. Yeah, so you may have heard there's some ish going down with memory, specifically DRAM, the stuff in your computer and phone. In the last 6 months, memory pricing has gone absolutely friggin' bonkers. For example, a 32 gig DDR5 kit that cost around $100 in mid-2025 now runs over $400. Single 16 gig DIMMs are pushing $200. That's right, DRAM prices have surged over 175% on average since this time last year, with some chip categories spiking nearly 300% from prices found just 3 months ago. It is said that tech gets cheaper over time, not more expensive, so what the heck is going on? Well, artificial intelligence, specifically the absolutely insatiable demand for HBM or high bandwidth memory used in AI training hardware. Now, to be clear, HBM is not the same stuff that's in your laptop. It's a far different and more expensive product, but all memory shares the same wafer fabrication process, and it's a zero-sum game. Every wafer allocated to an HBM stack for an NVIDIA GPU is a wafer not making it into the LPDDR on your next laptop. Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, the three memory oligopoly members, have all reallocated manufacturing capacity towards these high-margin, trendy AI chips. They want money, and that has cratered the supply of commodity, less expensive DRAM. Data centers now consume over 70% of top-tier memory chip production, and IDC forecasts that demand growing roughly 35% in 2026, against only a 23% supply growth. Meaning that, yeah, it's math, guys. Shortages are expected to persist through at least early 2028, and until that time, memory will get ever more expensive than it already is. Ugh. So then what does that mean for you and me, the folks buying computers? Well, it means the PC prices are going up. And you might be thinking, well, they already have. Yeah, they're going to go up more. Dell has already hiked their rates by 15 to 30% across its commercial lineup. And their COO literally said, quote, "We've never witnessed costs escalating at the current pace before. Ever." For context, Dell was founded in 1984. So things are not good right now. HP is slated to rise prices starting this spring, and small outfits like Framework, with its very little leveraging power, bumped its DDR5 prices by 50% in December, and then again later that month, and then again last month, and then again last week. And they've all but promised it will continue to happen. Everybody, by necessity, is passing those costs onto you. Well, everybody except for Apple. In what world do we live? Now, Apple has been charging $200 per 8 gig memory tier since, and I kid you not, 2016. Over a decade. They have not lowered prices even once. And if you're a naive little Apple idiot that's about to say, "But Quinn, that was using DDR3, and now we have amazing DDR5 today," I would point you to this chart that shows that regardless of memory type, it is consistently and dependably decreased in price over time. Apple's RAM is not special, it's just severely overpriced and has been forever. Well, I guess it was overpriced, because now Apple's $200 upgrade to go from 16 to 24 gigs of memory is cheaper than buying a 16 gig stick on the open market. Dell is currently charging $700 for the same 16 to 32 gig upgrade on select models that Apple charges $400 for. That sentence would have gotten me laughed off the internet just a couple of years ago, but it is true today in this weird thing that we live in called the world of AI. And look, the reason behind this isn't some galaxy brain forward thinking. It's just that Apple is buying fundamentally different product through a fundamentally different process. Dell, Lenovo, HP, they're all assemblers. They generally buy commodity DDR5 DIMMs on quarterly contracts at prices that track the spot market. And so when DRAM spikes, their costs, they spike in lockstep. But Apple is different. They design their own silicon and they buy custom LPDDR packages, since it's all on die, directly from Samsung, SK Hynix, and sometimes Micron on multi-year agreements, which are traditionally negotiated when memory is cheap. It's not that Apple buys more memory than Dell. They don't. It's that they're buying a different kind of memory packaging, and with locked-in pricing through different arrangements. And that distinction is currently worth billions of dollars. Apple has absolutely enormous purchase obligations to their suppliers and manufacturing partners. People don't get this. Like, Apple's most recent annual report suggests $56 billion worth owed to their suppliers, with nearly all payable in just 12 months. And that's only possible because they sit on like $145 billion in cash. People do not understand the scale at which this company operates. It is Apple that consumes 25% of the global smartphone memory market all by itself. And so locking in these long-term supply agreements isn't just prudent, it is like a necessity, and it is a staple of Tim Cook's strategy that Apple has been running since the early 2000s, when Apple unprecedentedly, in 2005, prepaid $1.25 billion worth of flash for the iPod to just lock up the market because there was such high demand and Apple knew they needed it. They wanted to weather the storm. This is Tim Cook's strategy, man. He has always viewed the supply chain and supply chain deals as competitive weapons. And well, the result of that? Last month, Tim Cook told investors in the quarterly meeting that, the memory market thing, that's had minimal impact on our December quarter margins. And Apple guided a 49% gross margin for the current quarter, which is nearly double what PC OEMs operate at normally. And right now, they are not operating normally because the market is imploding. Like, Apple has some of the lowest component costs in the market because they manufacture at insane scale and they purchase in insane quantities that almost nobody else can afford. It's no longer that they make a ton of money because their hardware is so much more expensive than the competition. It isn't. Like, wake up. It's 2026, man. Analyst Ming-Chi Kuo puts it bluntly. Apple's playbook is clear. Use the market chaos to their advantage, secure the chips, absorb the cost, and grab more market share. They'll make it back later on the services side. Now, whether or not you find that admirable or dystopian is up to you, but the practical result is that Macs have not gone up in price yet, while everything else has. Now, before this starts sounding like a love letter, let me talk about the part that Apple still is screwing you on, and that is storage. Because while RAM pricing has accidentally reached market parity, Apple's SSD pricing remains comfortably in the realm of highway robbery, despite NAND also seeing price increases. It costs $800 to go from 256 gigabytes to 2 terabytes on a Mac Mini. A Samsung 990 Pro 2 terabyte SSD retails for double what it did last year, and it still costs less than half of what Apple charges. Find another option, and you're pushing 4 times markup. And SSD is a bit of a misnomer anyhow, since Apple's SSDs are literally just bare NAND chips on a PCB, unlike what you'd find on a full retail SSD with a controller and DRAM cache and supporting components, so it should be even crazier. Look, there are niche third-party upgrade kits that continue to prove this point even more. You can get a bespoke 2 terabyte kit from Expand to Mac Mini, manufacturing in low volume for about half the cost of what Apple charges with identical NAND and the same performance. Speaking of things Apple overcharges for, their $19 polishing cloth. Unfortunately, I bought several of these because I found out a few years ago that they are very, very good microfibers. They're just too small and too expensive. So, introducing Copeland Supply's Cloth Pro Max. This is mine. I made this. This costs $1 less. Do you like this custom packaging? $1 less than Apple's polishing cloth, but it's way bigger. And I worked with a materials scientist spending 5 figures to develop what I believe is truly the best triple blend cloth on the market. This ain't O'Daddy's microfiber. It is fantastic. It matches, or frankly, in my opinion, exceeds the performance of Apple's in many circumstances. It's cheaper, it's big, and you can save 10% at checkout using code Snazzy with free domestic shipping using the link below. Please buy my merch. So here's the reality. Apple's RAM pricing is temporarily fair, storage remains extortionate, and this new duality is important to recognize because it helps us define where value actually lives within Apple's lineup. For over 12 years, from 2012 through 2024, Apple sold entry-level Macs with just 8 gigabytes of base RAM, far past when it was acceptable to do such a thing. I mean, even the $1,600 M3 MacBook Pro from 2023 came with 8 gigs of base memory. What the heck? That finally changed in late 2024 when Apple made 16 gigs the minimum across all Macs, even legacy models, at no price increase, effectively a $200 value bump driven partly by Apple Intelligence and requiring 16 gigs to run their models, but also partly of years being competitively embarrassed, I suppose. But regardless of why they did it, the result of 16 gigs of memory is that for the first time in over a decade, the base model Mac didn't require a paid upgrade at the time of purchase to make it usable for just about anyone. And that changes the entire value calculus because Apple's pricing has always been most competitive at the base configurations. And so that brings us to the two Macs that I think make the strongest value case in Apple's lineup right now. And they sit at opposite ends in the lineup, but still in the base configuration. And a surprise to nobody, yeah, the M4 Mac Mini is the value king. It was a great deal at $599 when it was new and RAM could be found cheap, and now, given that it can be found as little as $400 some places, and in a world where every other computer has increased in price, it is a bananas good deal. $400 for a Mac with a 10-core M4, 16 gigs of unified memory, Thunderbolt 4, and in a 5-inch by 5-inch by 2-inch enclosure that at idle sips just 4 watts from the wall. And I know we talk about Apple Silicon and efficiency all the time, but that last number really matters more than you might think in a low-end configuration like this. Fellow YouTuber Jeff Geerling measured that the Mac Mini was 32% more efficient than any other ARM single-board computer that he had ever tested, and in a different galaxy from x86 consumption. And a MacRumors user similarly documented a 33-watt load average on an M4 versus 600 watts on an Intel 13700K and NVIDIA RTX 3080 PC with comparable export times using the same project in Premiere Pro. So, for daily computer users, that's going to translate to real money, like $50 to $100 in electricity savings alone every year. Great! I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The M4 Mac Mini is one of the most incredible computers that Apple has ever made, and I really only think that it's bested by one other machine, the most underrated Mac that Apple has sold since 2020, and that is the entry-level 14-inch Pro SKU MacBook Pro. Today's base M4 Pro MacBook Pro config comes with a fantastic SoC, 24 gigs of RAM, a still small but at least usable 512 gig SSD, and it can often be had for as low as $1,600, $400 off of its retail price. And if you want the higher bin chip and a 1 terabyte SSD, B&H recently had the $2,200 list price Mac on sale for just $1,799. And that includes all of the MacBook Pro things that we have come to love about the MacBook Pro that make it best in class, and the things that have made it so since 2021. A fantastically bright 120Hz 1600 nits mini LED screen, an excellent keyboard and trackpad with best-in-class battery, all contained within a computer barely thicker and heavier than a MacBook Air. It outperforms other comparable machines like the XPS 14 in nearly every category while starting out at a lower price. The secret is found in these standard issue configs. Never build a custom Mac configuration if you can help it, because not only do you not get the retailer discount on the back end, but you're the one pushing up the average sales price on Apple's balance sheet to make up for all of the lower margin base tier machines. Even if you ignore the average lifespan of a Mac, which is typically longer than that of a PC, and you ignore the resale value, which is usually higher, and ignore the operating system, which, like, have you seen Windows 11 lately? Oh my gosh, it's horrible. The reality is that no single machine in Apple's lineup is a bad deal right now. And a few options, like that base Mac Mini and M4 Pro MacBook Pro, remain the best value machines in the entire computing industry. A Mac from Apple, the best deal. Like, what? But this gravy train may not last forever, because Apple isn't fully insulated from market realities. They can absorb component inflation and take a hit to their average selling price for a while, but they can't eat those costs indefinitely if the memory market doesn't correct. What they can do, however, is obfuscate price increases inside of product refreshes, and conveniently, that's almost certainly what is about to happen. You see, all the rumors suggest that Apple is planning 2 MacBook Pro updates this year, which sounds crazy to me, but those are the rumors. The first, M5 Pro and M5 Max models, could arrive as early as March, or at least so the rumors suggest. It was said that they'd arrive in early February, but Yeah, that didn't happen. These refreshes will be spec bumps only, the same chassis, the same display, same everything, except faster silicon. The second refresh, yeah, this is the one that matters. A full system redesign with the M6 Pro and M6 Max chips targeted for the end of this year, Q4 2026. After 5 years, this update is reportedly significant. First, we're getting a tandem OLED display using Samsung's 8th generation panels. Secondly, it is rumored to have an even thinner chassis. Okay, Johnny Ive. Third, the dynamic island will be replacing the notch. So long, see ya, didn't care for ya, and I still don't really want a dynamic island there, but whatever. And then, yeah, we're getting a touchscreen, the first for any Mac. And by the way, the reason I'm excited is because not that I really want a touchscreen, though I do. I've been using an iPad Pro a lot as my main computer, and I constantly reach to touch my Mac, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't do that. And everybody's like, oh, nobody's going to do that. Apple will never do that. Remember when Steve Jobs says nobody wants to reach up and touch their computer? And for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, how long has it been? I've been saying, what are you talking about? They make it. It's called the iPad. They're going to put it on the Mac eventually, believe me. And then macOS Big Sur came out, macOS 11, and I'm like, there's a whole new version number. This is when it's going to happen. They've spaced everything out. It's all huge. This is designed for tap targets. And then it didn't happen for years and years and years and years, and everybody said, you're stupid. And I said, wait, they're combining all the OSs into one OS, and everything's going to be like continuous and really great. And then that didn't happen, but it actually kind of did because of Apple Silicon, but not really. And then everybody still said you're stupid. Well, guess what, idiot? Now I'm laughing. I was only kind of wrong. What else are the MacBook Pros getting? Oh yeah, M6 chips built on TSMC's 2nm process. Samsung has reportedly committed $3.1 billion to the OLED production line for this machine alone. And that leads us to the catch. Mark Gurman reports that it is likely to come with a much higher price tag, these new MacBook Pros, that is. Estimates range from $300 to $500 more expensive than current models. Now, the M4 iPad Pro kind of set this precedent a couple of years ago when it had a $200 price bump across the board when it moved from LCD to tandem OLED. And critically, I think that this redesign gives Apple natural cover to quietly fold in component inflation alongside the OLED premium. Customers will attribute the higher price to the shiny new display and the touchscreen, rather than the memory crisis surcharges that are very real. Though I just kind of thought, maybe the reason we're getting two MacBook Pros in the same year is because they'll keep them both around. The M5 with the old form factor, that stays at the old price, and then there's a new fancy one with a fancy pants display and OLED and whatever, it's way more money, and then, you know, that's a good idea. I should probably write that down and put that in my script. It's worth noting that Apple actually has not raised the prices of the MacBook Pro since 2021, a span of time during which we've all experienced enormous inflation, tariffs, and now surging component costs. And while Apple benefits from the fact that building today's MacBook Pro is cheaper than building launch day's MacBook Pro, because parts always come down in cost as they age, that buffer does have its limits. Sooner or later, the bill comes due, and a flashy redesign with a tandem OLED and a touchscreen is the perfect vehicle to make you want to pay more without feeling like you're subsidizing a memory crisis. But before any of that, something is happening right now. Apple just announced that in early March, they're inviting members of the press, not me, to a hands-on event, hands-on events at a few locations around the world. The same kind of thing they did with the iPad Pro a couple of years back. Please buy my cloth. This format tells you a lot. These are products that Apple considers notable enough to warrant in-person impressions of, but not quite deserving of a full keynote. Expect a short video or two from Apple, some hands-on time, and embargo-synced coverage flooding your timeline. One product almost certainly making the appearance is going to be the new M5 Pro and Max MacBook Pros that we just talked about, but yet you don't bring people out across the world to see those. The other product rumored I think is far more interesting in the context of this video, a machine that has been whispered about for years and would fundamentally reshape the bottom of Apple's laptop lineup, and that is a low-cost MacBook. Not a MacBook Air, not a MacBook Pro, a MacBook powered not by an M-series silicon chip, but by the A18 Pro. Yeah, the same chip in the iPhone 16 Pro. Now, before you recoil in horror, consider what the A18 Pro actually is. It's a 6-core CPU, 6-core GPU SoC built on top of TSMC's very good 4nm process. Not only is it more than capable of handling what most people actually do with their laptops, but it favors itself quite well against the M1 in multi-core performance, and it's vastly better in single-core performance. And that's a chip that I think has aged like fine wine and will only continue to. The key to using this iPhone chip is the rumored price, around $600. $600 for a Mac laptop. That's less than most mid-range PC laptops and slots in just above Chromebook killing territory. I would expect a MacBook Air-esque display, like probably sans notch old school with maybe thicker bezels to separate it from the Air, though it may be closer than we expect because the Air 2 is also long overdue for a display update. It's not good anymore. It hasn't been for a lot of years. The Air display is a disappointment, and it's the reason I don't use one and the reason I hate the Air and wish the regular MacBook would just come back. And by that, I don't mean the new one, but like the old one that was really, really thin, and this is not that because it's cheap. Sorry. But do you know what? No, I refuse to give up on this dream because the introduction of this new low-end machine would conveniently give Apple room to nudge the Air's price up as well, certainly alongside a refresh. Maybe with a gorgeous display and a super thin design. Maybe make it, I don't know, an Air, since it'll no longer be the entry point in the lineup, because we'll have the crapbook. As for RAM on the crapbook, well, my bold and probably wrong prediction is this: 12 gigs of memory. Hear me out. The A18 Pro with the iPhone 16 Pro shipped with 8 gigs, but Apple's likely to bump that up in 2026 for a laptop workload while still trying to keep costs below the 16 gig floor of the M series Max. So you'll look at a $500, $600 laptop. Many of them have 16 gigs, but not all of them. A lot of them are still on 8, and 12 is frankly a rarity, but Apple's already doing weird stuff. They've got 24 on the MacBook Pro. Like, I think it's possible. 12 gigs isn't ideal in 2026, but at $600, it doesn't need to be. If the Mac Mini is any indication, we'll also see that this thing will hit retailer discounts pretty quickly, and that could push it to below $500 within just a few months from release. A sub $500 Mac laptop in a market where everybody else is raising prices. I feel like a crazy person. What's happening? Now, if you'll permit me just a little bit of space to vent, because I know everybody's going to talk about this, despite the obvious Chromebook comparisons, which will be made on release, this machine will not conquer education. Almost certainly not. And Apple knows this. They already lost that war in the late 2010s when Macs were super overpriced and they were trying to push the iPad in classrooms instead of like real computers. And COVID just cemented that loss as elementary and secondary schooling shifted almost entirely to web-based platforms. And Google's tight integration with Instructure's Canvas and Google Classroom and the broader ecosystem of web-first education tools just gave Chromebooks an insurmountable lead that Apple never seriously attempted to claw back because I think they just knew it was game over. But at $600, this new MacBook doesn't need to beat Chromebooks in K-12 to be a massive success. It can absolutely compete with higher-end Chromebooks and mid-range Windows laptops, you know, the machines that are purchased in volume by corporate buyers and college students and anyone who needs a real computer but doesn't need a powerful one. And this is weird because on one hand, Apple has never historically pursued low-margin customers, but on the other hand, they've also never had high market share on the Mac, and they desperately want it. More Macs sold means deeper ecosystem lock-in, more iCloud subscriptions, more Apple TV Plus trials, more App Store revenue. If you can pursue that growth, however small, profitably, and if there's one thing that Tim Cook knows how to do, it's to do this kind of stuff profitably by maximizing supply chain and make it, seemingly low margin businesses seem like a success, then why not do it? And I think that is what is exciting. That's the through line here. For 17 years on YouTube, I've been told time and time again that Macs are overpriced. And for most of that time, it's been true. And I knew that. I just didn't care because I liked macOS enough to pay the premium. Or not. I mean, I was the Hackintosh guy, so I didn't always pay it, but the ground has genuinely shifted. Not because Apple suddenly became generous. Let's not kid ourselves. They still charge $200 for 256 gigs of NAND flash that cost them maybe $15, but because the rest of the industry got dealt a terrible hand, and Apple just happened to be holding a royal flush of long-term supply contracts and vertically integrated silicon and more. Luck, strategy, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. The reality is that right now, today, a Mac is the best value in computing. Now, whether that lasts, well, that's going to depend on memory markets and OLED panel costs, and how long Apple can resist the urge to pad their margins on the next generation of hardware. But for the moment, for right now, for the first time in my lifetime, the Fanboy math, it actually checks out. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay snazzy. Buy a cloth! Listen, it's so good. That's quality.